Breaking right now on Morning News Now, history in the Middle East as phase one of a peace plan to end the war in Gaza gets underway. This morning, all 20 living Israeli hostages released by Hamas. They are either back home or on the way. A moving reunion video right there as several of the hostages already reunited with their families after 2 years in captivity. In exchange, what you're seeing on your screen, the first wave of Palestinian prisoners have been released by Israel. Earlier this morning, a standing ovation for President Trump at Israel's Knesset, where he addressed Israeli lawmakers before heading to Egypt for a peace summit with several other heads of state. A notable absence in Egypt will be Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who turned down an invitation by President Trump.
No sound.
We're now showing you Hostage Square live right in Tel Aviv. Anxious anticipation there for all the hostages to come home. Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe Fryer will be with us momentarily. There is a lot of breaking news to get to this morning. It is a historic day. We're going to start with our Matt Bradley. He is right there in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. Matt, of course, a massive headline this morning. All remaining 20 living hostages have now been released. A major part of this peace plan. We understand only 4 bodies, though, of hostages who are deceased are being released today. Walk us through that. Could that derail any of this peace plan? And tell us what happened overnight.
I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because once again there's another helicopter that's flying through the square. Rapturous applause. You saw this last hour when we were speaking to you. But again, as you mentioned, you're asking about these dead hostages who have not been released. There are 28 dead hostages who are supposed to be released. Only 4 of them, as you mentioned, are going to be released today. The families of the hostages not pleased, to put it mildly, and they're calling this a violation of this hard-won treaty or truce or ceasefire, depending on what you call it. But this is something that was anticipated. The negotiators knew that there was going to be this problem because, quite simply, a lot of those bodies that were buried by Hamas operatives who have since been killed. And some of those bodies are from people who were killed in the Gaza Strip, like Israeli soldiers, as long as 10 years ago. So they're going to need, and this was something that was actually included in a lot of the discussions around this, an international team to come in and try to find these corpses in the Gaza Strip so that they can be exhumed and sent back to Israel. So while this does seem like a violation of the ceasefire, it's probably not going to be a deal breaker because all the parties were informed of this difficulty.
Matt, just give us more color on the ground there. Obviously, this is a massive moment, what every Israeli person has been waiting for, certainly the tens of thousands that are gathered in that square. How many people are there? What is programming like throughout the day? How much are you hearing cheers or boos, I know, at the mention of Prime Minister Netanyahu? Tell me about being there right now.
Yeah, it's really electric. I mean, it really is just an incredible experience witnessing history like this once again. And, you know, the emotions here are so fascinating, really. As you mentioned, it is sorrow and joy tinged by politics. And that's something that, you know, we keep hearing over and over again. And actually, we've seen here in this square just about every week for the past 2 years. The type of person who comes to this square here in Tel Aviv, there's a profile. This is the type of person who was maybe protesting against Benjamin Netanyahu before October 7th, against his so-called reform for the judiciary. Now, those people are still protesting against Netanyahu. They wanted the hostages to be free. Now, they got what they want. They have not clearly warmed to the Prime Minister. As you saw, there was no carrying of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to the Knesset on the big screen behind me. Instead, they started showing the speeches only when opposition leader Yair Lapid got up there and started speaking. And then there was adoration when President Donald Trump also came up and was speaking. This is the man of the hour, and you can see, you can't necessarily see right around here, but before there were American flags, there were people dressed up in American flags. Everybody that I've been speaking to here, they have the name of one man on their lips, President Trump. The gratitude here is overflowing.
We've seen Make America Great Again hats there in Tel Aviv. Also, members of parliament wearing hats that said Trump, the peace president. So certainly fans of our American president there on the ground in Israel. Matt, you have just been covering this, for 2 years now. You've basically lived in Tel Aviv. Tell us about what it is that Israelis want to see. You mentioned that dichotomy of them not even carrying Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, but then they do carry and even cheer for the opposition leader. How does Israel move forward?
That's a really, really good question, because Israel is now basically a pariah state. After 2 years of war, they have redrawn the maps of the Middle East. They have defeated all of their enemies on every field of battle, whether it be Lebanon, Iran, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Houthis in Yemen. They're still fighting, but they've been badly, badly beaten by the Israelis. And after all of that, the freeing of the hostages, there is a major price to pay. The Israelis have compromised their standing in the world, such as it was. They rely on President Trump, and that's one of the reasons why he's so adored here, as they see the rest of the Western world, all of those European and other Western countries. This is another image, I believe, of a hostage family member meeting their family members. We've seen that constantly. But again, Israel's standing in the world has been so badly compromised that soldiers here don't want their faces shown when we take images of them, because they want to be able to travel abroad. They're worried that they'll be arrested or attacked by people. They really are in this position now where they have closed themselves in so much, fighting a war that they see as imminently just. And they look at the rest of the world, particularly in Western Europe and those countries that came out last month recognizing a Palestinian state, as people who are just inundated with anti-Semitism. That typically is the response here, or that they do not have the wherewithal or the understanding of the threat that the Israelis face. Israelis feel that they have fought this battle for the entire rest of the Western world, for Western civilization. And the people that I've been speaking to are legitimately upset, confused, and they feel betrayed by the fact that the world, to them, seems to have turned their back on them.
Matt, viewers now are seeing on the right side of their screen President Trump arriving at Air Force One. This is at the Tel Aviv airport, about to head to Egypt for this Middle East peace ceremony. Again, quite a few hours behind schedule. He actually made a joke when he was in front of the Israeli parliament saying he's going to be late. I wonder if any of the other leaders will still be there. They will, in fact, be there. We are hearing from our Keir Simmons as he heads to this. And really, they all sort of agree to formalize, at least symbolically, this 20-point peace plan. Matt, tell me what people there in Hostage Square, what Israelis are telling you they're looking for today out of all of these world leaders gathered to focus on this 20-point peace plan.
Well, I think one of the things that is really coming out of this whole agreement in a big way, other than, of course, the end of the war, the freedom of the hostages, is an interesting realignment in the Middle East that has belied all observers' predictions. We're now seeing President Trump, by force of his personality, having brought all of these disparate countries, many of them long inimical to Israel and its very existence, into Israel's orbit. And that is an extraordinary difference from what we saw even 2 years ago, when most of the Arab and Muslim world was busy condemning Israel. Now, we're hearing a lot of positive signs, and the fact that we're seeing so many far-flung nations willing to attend this conference in Egypt. There was talk that the president of Indonesia might attend. That no longer seems to be the case, but I can't be sure exactly at this moment whether he's going to be there. The Iranian president was invited. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu no longer attending that meeting. But this is going to be a collection of oddballs, of a very funny group of people who are really coming together around this ceasefire and around President Trump himself. And this is something that a lot of folks who have been observing the Middle East for a while, like myself, might be surprised to see, that after all of the allegations of genocide, crimes against humanity for what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip, now all of these people who had been saying this for years are gathering together in one room to celebrate peace. It's an extraordinary moment.
Matt, you mentioned earlier sort of the politicizing of this, not only, of course, as we've just been discussing right now for viewers in Hostage Square, but also what we saw in front of the Israeli parliament this morning. President Trump imploring that Bibi Netanyahu be pardoned. Also him telling Prime Minister Netanyahu, take it easier on the opposition leader. He's a nice guy. Right now, we're seeing, I can see President Trump, I can see Prime Minister Netanyahu here right as the president is about to depart from Israel. Walk us through just sort of this web of politics in that room. Of course, this happy, joyous moment that it looks to be an end to this conflict on the horizon, but the politics that are still tinged in every single bit of this and that continue to be a struggle in Israel.
I'm really glad you asked that, Savannah, because it's fascinating, and we really don't talk about it very much because it is so terribly complicated. But what we saw amongst the parliament, amongst the government, is the very, very tenuous situation that Benjamin Netanyahu has found himself in for the past 2 years. He's been running a government of basically rivals and people who have fought against each other. That ceasefire deal that was brought to first the war cabinet and then to the government, there were two ultra-right-wing parties who said that they weren't going to be voting for it because it left Hamas intact in the Gaza Strip, such as it is, not fully intact. And it also would free the 250 life sentence prisoners in Israeli jails who many people on the right here believe will simply go back to fighting Israel. So of the 4 goals that Netanyahu laid out when he said he was going to be trying to finish this war, one of the goals, destroying Hamas, is not been achieved. And that's something that some of these right-wing ministers are very, very upset about. The man we heard from, Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, he had said for so long that if those right-wing ministers back out of Benjamin Netanyahu's government, that he will rush in to save the government. He never had to do that because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was able to keep those right-wing ministers on side. This is a parliamentary system, so if ministers leave the government collapses. So he was able to keep them on side. Yair Lapid never had to step in. And now, Benjamin Netanyahu in many ways seems stronger than ever, buoyed by his success in ending the war and the support from the most popular man in Israel, Donald Trump. It's a good look for Netanyahu, and a lot of folks that I've been speaking to say he might just go right into elections, which are supposed to be happening next October. He might have them a little earlier to just benefit from the goodwill he's accumulated over just the past couple of weeks, ever since he's bested Iran, had a deal with the Lebanese Hezbollah, and now freed the hostages. He is politically more bulletproof than he has been in the past, and this man is a survivor.
Matt Bradley, thank you very much for reporting. I'm going to ask you to stay with us. Again, you're there on the ground in Tel Aviv in Hostage Square at the Tel Aviv airport. That is what you're seeing on your screen right now. President Trump, presumably soon, taking off for Egypt. Again, quite a few hours behind schedule. But there he goes, walking up the stairs right now to board Air Force One. I want to bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who has been listening to the president this morning as he addressed Israeli parliament and is with us now as he heads to Egypt for this next step here, this Middle East peace ceremony. Monica, walk us through what we will see from the president once he gets to Egypt.
Yeah, these are really some remarkable images that you have just been showing here, Savannah. The president was also joined by his daughter, Ivanka Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who, of course, played a pivotal role in getting to this place. But as the president now is going to be leaving Israel, he does head to Egypt, where he's going to be visiting Sharm el-Sheikh, which is a Red Sea resort town where there will be this signing ceremony with many heads of state. We know leaders from France, from Germany, from the UK, and others have gathered there to witness what will be this official signing of the beginning of the end of the war in Gaza. And it's important to talk about it in that context, because this release of the hostages today and the ongoing release of the remains and the bodies of those who were killed but held in Hamas captivity over the last 2 years, that still has to play out. And then, of course, what comes next is really crucial as well in terms of what we will see come from this. But the president is going to be celebrating and touting the fact fact that leaders have gotten to this point, and he is going to be, we understand, joined notably by the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. In terms of exactly what we're going to see, what they're going to be signing, who's going to be signing, those details are still a little bit up in the air. And as you were just discussing some time ago, there was a question about whether Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was going to attend this. We know the invite was extended, but ultimately the Prime Minister's office said that he could not attend, that he could not make it work due to the ongoing holiday there in Israel. And so the Prime Minister came to bid farewell to President Trump as he gets ready to leave there on Air Force One, marking the end of a pretty extraordinary series of hours on the ground there, where the president did meet with hostage families. We know there was a very emotional moment where parents thanked the president in at least one instance for all the work he had done up until this point and continuing on. And then, of course, where the president did address the Knesset there in a very lengthy speech where he made several headlines. Savannah.
And Monica, Joe's here now. That you say lengthy speech. It was 65 minutes long, and throughout it, he thanked many members of his administration, not to mention Steve Witkoff, his key envoy there. Talk about who did play a key role in brokering the ceasefire agreement, and who is going to play a key role in Egypt and moving forward as we work on the points of this 20-point plan and then phases beyond phase one.
Certainly, the special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, played and will continue to play an essential role in how these negotiations really progressed. He has been working at this for months. President Trump acknowledged this is a person who didn't have this kind of background, specifically when it comes to foreign policy. Steve Witkoff is a man. He's a deal maker, but he is somebody who the president, in his words, said he thought he could get into these rooms and have difficult conversations, citing a recent conversation even that Steve Witkoff had with President Putin face to face in trying to see if there can be any kind of an off-ramp and an end to the war in Ukraine. But Steve Witkoff specifically has been to the region many different times. He's been inside Gaza. He's been trying to help to push for the effort to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza, and he was really a constant presence throughout all of this alongside Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who President Trump even talked about in the past about their really bitter rivalry when they were candidates on the campaign trail that has now led them to this moment where they are total allies, and where, again, the president heaped praise on Secretary Rubio for all of the involvement that he has had in this. And in addition to those two, the person that the president really wanted to thank here was Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, of course, married to Ivanka Trump. The two of them worked in the first term of the Trump administration here out of the White House. They were far more involved in the day-to-day, and that is different than what we are seeing now in this second term, where they are not here as any kind of government employees or advisors in a formal capacity or in a day-to-day sense. But Jared Kushner has been brought on when it comes to issues related to the Middle East to be a key advisor, and certainly over the last 2 months or so, he has had an even more pronounced role in taking part in some of these key meetings. He was also a part of making sure that in meetings with key Arab leaders to get their support, to get their sign-on, which was really essential throughout this entire process to get to this point. He played a key role in that, using his institutional knowledge and his past relationships. And so the team of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff together on the ground just over the last 10 days or so, they were an essential pair to get to an ultimate agreement by Hamas and Israel to this first phase of the deal. And now we all really are watching and waiting and wondering what kind of a role could he play in the future. He said that he likely will return to the sidelines for now, but I think personally it's hard to believe that he won't be at least involved a bit in what happens next, since the next phases of this peace plan and implementation of President Trump's own vision and framework here are really, really critical and really, really complex, guys.
All right, Monica Alba from the White House for us. Thank you very much for that reporting. Let's now go to Danielle Hamamdin. She's in the occupied West Bank. We're going to stay also on these images as President Trump is leaving shortly, but over in the West Bank, there is celebration over the release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees that we have been watching throughout the morning. Danielle says part of this deal, Israel's releasing 2,000 Palestinians, some of whom are prisoners. The majority are detainees, though, who have been held since October 7th. Tell us what you are seeing on the ground there, the reaction to this homecoming.
Sure. And, you know, I actually want to start by stepping back here and going to the previous ceasefire back in January. I was here, and of course, the release of the hostages back then occurred over a 6-week period. And whenever we would talk about phase 2, it was never when we get to phase 2. It was if we ever get to phase 2. Of course, we never did get there. Fighting resumed. And that is still very much on the minds of Palestinians, both in Gaza and the West Bank. They are very well aware that Hamas has now given up its only leverage. So what happens now? Yes, there is still deep distrust when it comes to Israel, but there is also an acknowledgement that Donald Trump has accomplished something that perhaps only Donald Trump can. And so for what happens after today, I think that'll be a tomorrow conversation. But today was about reunions in Gaza and reunions here in the West Bank. 2,000 detainees and prisoners in all, among them 250 security prisoners, many of them serving multiple life sentences. I think, you know, some of them serving 11, 12 life sentences, others long sentences, denying their charges. Dozens were released here behind me at this cultural center in Ramallah in the West Bank. We tried to speak to many of the family members who just were very guarded, I have to say. They were warned. The IDF called them before this release. They called them one by one to warn them, A, don't speak to the media, and 2, do not show any expressions of joy, because they know that those prisoners can easily be rearrested as they have in the past. Earlier today, we were standing outside the prison, Offer prison, where they were transferred to before coming here, and we heard drones buzzing above us, and next thing you know, these leaflets were dropped, and it says to the residents of the area, we are watching you everywhere. Do not show any signs of support towards terrorist organizations or you will be arrested. Now, in the past, those warnings have been ignored. This time it feels a little bit different. There was no sort of festive atmosphere like we have seen in the past. Over in Gaza, the pictures we're looking at, it is a different scenario there. 1,700 detainees. Those people, most of them have never been charged. They've been held for months, some since October 7th. They did not take part in the October 7th attacks, and they were held under what's called here administrative detention. It is a controversial policy that allows Israel to hold people and detain them for an indefinite period of time without charging them. They are in prison without knowing why. And some analysts, and some Palestinians rather, will tell you, you know, in our eyes, these are also hostages. Some analysts will say, no, you can't compare these hostages to actual hostages in Gaza, you know, but it is a fact that NGOs have documented over and over again torture, rape, malnutrition in some of these prisons. In fact, one soldier was convicted back in February of raping a Palestinian inmate. So a day of reunion here in Gaza and in the West Bank. But remember, of those 1,700, you've got journalists, you've got doctors, and you've got nurses. And one name that comes to mind for me is Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who was arrested back in December 2024. He is the pediatrician, Director General of Kamal Radwan Hospital. And one of the last videos seen of him shows him walking in the rubble in Gaza with his white doctor's coat, headed towards an IDF tank. He was arrested and he has been detained ever since. He has lost, as we understand, a third of his weight. And there were hopes that he would be released today. In fact, there is still some confusion about whether or not he could still be released. And there are some reports that suggest that it is now at the discretion of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but that is a case that we are following here closely, you guys.
Danielle, we're watching right now as Air Force One taxis the runway in Tel Aviv, preparing to take off to make the quick trip to Egypt. That's where President Trump is heading. We also know now that's where Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is going to attend this upcoming peace summit in Egypt. Talk about that development and what role it could play as the process moves forward.
Yeah, well, we talked about this earlier, but it's worth reminding viewers, Mahmoud Abbas is not a popular leader here in the West Bank. He is 88 years old. He has not held elections in 20 years. He is seen by most people as widely corrupt. And countries around the world have called for the PA here to reform before it can get involved in the governance of Gaza, something that Israel rejects altogether. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Egypt, but a surprise for many that he would be headed there. And when we talk about Mahmoud Abbas, worth also talking about one prisoner who is not out today, despite a push not only by Palestinians, but by many Israeli officials, and that is Marwan Barghouti, a name that you might be familiar with. He has been in prison for 20 years now, serving multiple life sentences. He's been convicted, held responsible for the killing of 5 civilians. The reason this man is so popular is because he is seen as a consensus candidate. He is seen as the only Palestinian leader who has the support of Hamas on one end of the political spectrum, all the way down to the more progressive end of the spectrum. And poll after poll shows that a majority of Palestinians would vote for him as their leader. He believes in a two-state solution. He has called for unarmed resistance. This is according to his son, Arab Barghouti, who I've interviewed. And I've spoken to the former Shin Bet chief, the former head of the Shin Bet, Ami Ayalon, who has said this man should be released because he is the answer to peace in the region. He is seen as the only man who could lead a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state. And it is for that reason that many people believe Israel will never let him out, because he is synonymous with possible peace in the region. There were hopes he was going to be released. Negotiators brought it to the attention of Steve Witkoff, I'm told by one of the negotiators who was involved, certainly in the final weeks, that Witkoff promised to deliver and failed to deliver on the case in the case of Marwan Barghouti. But it will be a disappointment to his family, of course. He's been there for 20 years and serving multiple life sentences, and it doesn't look like he's going to be getting out today, certainly.
All right, Danielle, we've just been watching President Trump take off from Tel Aviv for this brief flight to Egypt, where this Middle East peace ceremony will get underway, quite delayed. Danielle, thank you very much for your reporting from the West Bank. Stay with us for continuing coverage of this breaking news here on Morning News Now. We will be right back.
Welcome back. We are continuing our breaking news coverage of this historic day in the Middle East. All 20 of the surviving hostages in Gaza have now been released.
President Trump addressed the Israeli parliament earlier before departing to join a Middle East peace summit in Egypt. Here's a portion of his remarks as the president discussed this historic day in the region.
After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil for all of time. And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. I want to express my gratitude to a man of exceptional courage and patriotism, whose partnership did so much to make this momentous day possible. You know who I'm talking about. There's only one, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's an incredible triumph for Israel and the world to have all of these nations working together as partners in peace. And it's pretty unusual for you to see that, but it happened in this case. This was a very unusual point in time, a brilliant point in time. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. We have some very great talent, and they have no excuses for anything that's taken place, because we had some unbelievably good people working on this. We settled 8 wars in 8 months. I'm now including this one, by the way, if that's okay. They may say, well, that was quick, because yesterday I was saying 7, but now I can say 8. The hostages are back. The hostages are back. But when you settle 8 wars in 8 months, that means you don't like war. Everyone thought I was going to be brutal. In fact, I remember Hillary Clinton during a debate, she said, look at him, he's going to go to war with everybody. And actually, she said, he's got a personality that's all about war. No, and my personality actually is all about stopping wars. The United States has the greatest and most powerful military in the, right now, history of the world. I can tell you we have weapons that nobody's ever dreamt of. I only hope we never have to use them. I hated certain of the weapons because the level of power is so enormous. It's so dangerous, so bad. But we have to do what we have to do. We make the best weapons in the world, and we've got a lot of them. And we've given a lot to Israel, frankly. The cruelty of October 7th struck to the core of humanity itself. Nobody could believe what they were witnessing. The United States of America grieved alongside you, and we mourned for our own citizens who were so viciously taken that day, and to all the families whose lives were forever changed by the atrocities of that day, and all of the people of Israel, please know that America joins you in those two everlasting vows: never forget and never again. From October 7th until this week, Israel has been a nation at war, enduring burdens that only a proud and faithful people could withstand. It was a very tough period of time. For so many families across this land, it has been years since you've known a single day of true peace. But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over. We are going to have hope, harmony, opportunity, and happiness here in the spiritual and geographic center of the entire world. That's what you are. Israel, America, and all of the nations of the Middle East will soon be safer, stronger, greater, and more prosperous than ever before.
We've been listening to President Trump from just a few hours ago this morning in front of the Israeli parliament. He is now on his way to Egypt, which is where we find our Keir Simmons. He's already there for this Gaza Peace Summit. Keir, thanks for being with us. So walk us through what we're anticipating seeing today. Who is attending the summit, what we can expect, how it's all unfolding with the president being quite delayed.
Well, the extraordinary thing is that some of the most powerful leaders in the world are here right now in Sharm el-Sheikh, waiting for President Trump. I mean, I think it's a testament to the American presidential leverage that he has utilized to get to this stage. That, as an example, just before I came to talk to you, we were just a few steps away from here talking to the Dutch Prime Minister, who's come out to give a news conference. Not least because everyone's just waiting. The German Chancellor was here a short while ago. While President Trump was speaking at the Knesset, he came over, stood next to us, said, can I watch the speech on your NBC News monitor? Because, again, he was he had time. Then he went off to give a news conference with his own press pool. So there is also here the French President, Emmanuel Macron. There is the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. We haven't seen them yet. We have seen, though, the Saudi delegation stroll by. So that, in and of itself, is extraordinary and unusual. And at any moment, we are under the flight path. We might expect for Air Force One to fly right over us as President Trump arrives for the signing of this peace plan, this peace document. One of the issues is that we don't know what is going to be said in that document. I did ask the Dutch Prime Minister just a moment ago, and he said, well, give us a chance. The ink is hardly dry yet, but there are many, many things in the 20-point plan that President Trump, the Trump administration, put forward that got us to this stage that are very, very challenging. You'll have talked about already through the morning the question of how to disarm Hamas, how to ensure Hamas and other militant groups, it's not just Hamas, are not involved in the political process. Again, then how to rebuild Gaza, which is effectively entirely demolished. All of these things need to they need a concrete plan, they need a real plan. And I guess the meeting here now, it will be tonight, I suspect, because we had expected President Trump to be here some hours ago, and he's not here yet. All of these plans need to be put together by the leaders who who are here. It is very difficult, but I will say there is a real sense of optimism because this is a moment, as President Trump said, that many, many leaders have been hoping for, waiting for, and kind of yearning for in the past few years.
Keir, there was a moment briefly earlier this morning where we thought it was possible Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would also be flying to Egypt to attend the summit today. We since learned that Netanyahu declined the invitation from President Trump. What more are we learning about that? How significant is it that he's not there?
I think there is a broad desire.
Well, look, there are some reports, not confirmed by NBC News, that some Arab governments were uncomfortable about Prime Minister Netanyahu being here. The divisions in this region have deepened substantially as this war has continued, and many leaders and foreign ministers from the countries that are here have got to the point where they've been openly blaming Prime Minister Netanyahu for the continuation of that war. So I guess it's understandable that it wasn't possible to get the Israeli Prime Minister here to meet with the other leaders who are gathered for this summit. And then, on the other hand, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is also here, and I suspect the Israelis might have wondered whether their prime minister might come face-to-face with the Palestinian Authority president, whether they would want that. Now, of course, the Netanyahu government has said that it's a holiday and that's the reason why he isn't able to make it. But I think it does underscore, whatever the real reason, I think it does underscore again the hurdles that are ahead. And that's not being negative about what the future holds. It's just trying to be realistic and honest about some of the difficulties that, let's be honest, this region has been trying to resolve for decades. And clearly, even President Trump, I think, would say that you're not going to solve all of that in one day.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point, Keir. Jeremy Bash reminded us earlier, while we're calling this peace summit, think about the tensions that existed in the region even just on October 6th, 2023, prior to any of this unfolding. Keir, in this 20-point peace plan put forth by President Trump, one of the things that it specifically outlines is the governance of Gaza, that there will be this oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body known as the Board of Peace. Walk us through who is on board for that and who of these 20 or so world leaders that are there today will have any participation and their feelings on this.
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be honest with you, I think the answer is that we don't know. It's a very challenging thing. It's a high-risk strategy for a country, a neighboring country, to agree to effectively police Gaza while it's rebuilt, to police Gaza while the world tries to help bring about a Palestinian leadership that is acceptable to the Palestinians and also acceptable to the Israelis and acceptable to the region and the world. So, but it's a great question because how do you make all that happen unless some body is able to police the Gaza Strip and manage it? And then just the question of supplies and support for the people there. Just that is challenging. Aside from that question of how you rebuild the Gaza Strip that is effectively demolished with 2 million people still living there. These are all the sort of thorny issues that the leaders here and world leaders will need to get to. But whether they'll get to that today is a different matter. What certainly you can say, and I think there's a hint of it in that story about the question of whether Prime Minister Netanyahu was going to come here, what certainly you can say is that President Trump is very good at getting people together face to face and kind of just, almost you could say, just driving through, bulldozing through problems to just get them solved. But in the end, there are many granular details that can't be brushed over. They do have to be faced, and that I think is the difficult road ahead, no matter the optimism that there is here tonight here in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt.
Keir Simmons, Keir, thank you so much. We know you're standing by for the president's arrival there in Egypt. Now let's get some military analysis. We want to bring in retired Colonel Steve Warren. He is a former Pentagon spokesman. Colonel, good to have you with us. So on Sunday, we heard from Vice President J.D. Vance on Meet the Press suggesting U.S. troops in Israel will play some kind of role in the ceasefire plan in Gaza. What do you think U.S. military involvement is going to look like in the coming weeks?
Yeah, good morning. It's an important question. I think there will be some, as the vice president indicated, some U.S. military involvement there. But I don't think we should expect to see American troops, at least this early on, conducting patrols or doing any type of so-called peacekeeping operations. What we have, United States Central Command has long had a presence in Israel. And these are logisticians. These are experts in civil military affairs. These are experts in how to rebuild and how to continue to get that aid flowing in to Gaza. And I think that's what we'll, at least in the beginning, really see.
Colonel, a major issue here that also remains majorly vague is the disarmament of Hamas. It's something, that is a key point in this peace plan and for stability in the region, though how that actually happens remains to be seen, how it's ensured that it happens. We were even reminded earlier this morning by Jeremy Bashir on our show about as the Palestinian prisoners come back and they're sort of repatriated, the government that would do any of that had previously been Hamas. How do you think something like this ends up being carried out? Is there any way to ensure compliance of it or something close to it?
Savannah, there is going to have to be some sort of external force to oversee this, whether it's Americans, which I frankly do not think it will be, or other forces from the region. Neighboring nations, it's in their interest to see peace. It's in their interest to see, frankly, and let's be clear, Hamas is a terrorist army. So it's in everyone's interest to see this terrorist army disarmed. And you see this in the peace plan, in the 20-point peace plan, where it talks about, again, vaguely, as you pointed out, it talks about some sort of an international force that will come together and provide oversight. It talks about providing training to a Palestinian police force. So we have to see how this develops. But the only way to get the terrorist army called Hamas to disarm is, frankly, to have someone there to oversee it.
Well, let's talk about Israel's military in the wake of this. As the peace plan says, Israeli troops have started to withdraw from parts of the Gaza Strip. But what happens next? To what degree do you think we'll continue to see the presence of Israeli forces within the enclave there?
Well, that's right. So the Israeli forces have already withdrawn to what they're calling in this plan the so-called yellow line, which is outside. It's inside of the Gaza Strip, but outside of the main, sort of built up populated area. So the Israeli forces, the IDF now controls about a little bit more than 50% of the Gaza Strip, and this is under phase one, the first phase of this withdrawal. The plan calls for additional withdrawals where the Israelis will move back a little further to where they are only occupying about 40 and then 15% of the Strip, and ultimately it calls upon them to withdraw and create a perimeter around the Strip. There are not specific timelines associated with this additional withdrawal yet. Those right now will probably be negotiated in the near future. And normally these type of withdrawals are what we call conditions-based as opposed to time-based. This first withdrawal was time-based. The Israelis had agreed to pull back to the yellow line on the 10th. But going forward, you can expect the withdrawal conditions or the withdrawal criteria to be conditions-based. In other words, if Hamas or the Palestinians do X, then the Israeli forces will withdraw to the next location.
All right. Retired Colonel Steve Warren, thank you very much for your expertise and time this morning. Well, stay with us for continuing breaking coverage on this news here on Morning News Now. We will be right back. We are back on a historic morning in the Middle East. President Trump addressed the Israeli parliament earlier this morning. He is now on his way to Egypt for this Middle East Peace Summit. Our Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. Matt, their energy has been nothing short of electric in Hostage Square this morning. Overnight, of course, the 20 remaining living hostages that were in Gaza were released, still waiting on the remains of most of the hostages who had died in Gaza. Walk us through what's happened there in Hostage Square since we checked in with you just a bit ago.
Yeah, I mean, this has been, as you said, an electric atmosphere. So many folks here. I think the height was in the 30,000s. I've been here since dawn, so I can't actually see how far away everybody was. The crowds have kind of dwindled since then, but it still is a party atmosphere. You can hear the music being played. That countdown clock still going on. It's been there since October 7th for about 2 years, and it's still ticking away, showing that there still are hostages in the Gaza Strip. None of them alive, as you mentioned. That successful operation, 20 living hostages have now been freed. And we keep seeing on the screen behind me, in addition to the speeches at the Knesset by the president and by the opposition leader, we keep seeing images to huge cheers of these returned hostages meeting their family members. So really, this is a day of celebration. Tomorrow, the day after, will probably present complications.
Yeah, and Matt, I do want to ask you more about that. The group representing families of hostages saying only 4 bodies have been released today. Of those remains, 28 were supposed to be released. Tell us more about what we are learning about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the names of those 4 hostages who are to be released, their corpses. But the fact is that all of the people who were involved in these negotiations, who were involved in crafting this plan, were well aware that Hamas said that they weren't going to be able to recover all of the bodies probably in time, that they would need more time in order to do that. The living hostages, of course, much more accessible. They're constantly under guard. The dead hostages, some of them, according to people that I've been speaking to on the Palestinian side, some of them were buried by Hamas fighters who have since been killed. So their whereabouts are a mystery. Some of their deaths date back as long as 10 years. So they've almost been forgotten. This is a very novel operation. It sounds as though, according to some of the plans, there was to be an international body of experts who were going to go into the Gaza Strip and help these militants exhume the bodies of the people they killed. We haven't heard a whole lot about that continuing, but this is a vexing issue. The family members of the hostages, of course, have said that this is a clear violation of this treaty. But the fact that everybody who was involved in crafting this plan was aware that this was going to be a major barrier and a major complication, that they had already asked for more time in order to recover these bodies, makes me think that at this moment, this is probably not going to interrupt the process of this ceasefire, which has been so much anticipated. If it remains the case that those bodies aren't going to be recovered for days or weeks, we might hear a louder protest, and we might see this treaty actually in danger.
So, Matt, you're there. For our viewers, there's this split screen going on. The large picture you see on your left is the same place that Matt is. That's Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. In the top right corner is a screen of Gaza in Khan Yunis there, where Palestinian prisoners are being released. Now, Matt, while you're on the ground in Israel, you have done extensive reporting on what's happening inside Gaza for us throughout this conflict. Right now, that includes hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning to just decimated homes and neighborhoods as they're able to move about the enclave and get back to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Tell us what we know at this point about aid entering the enclave. That was a big piece of this 20-point plan. We are beginning to see it. Is it enough?
Well, the idea behind the 20-point plan is to see basically the same level of aid that was seen going into the Gaza Strip during that 6-week ceasefire that was ended in March when Israel once again resumed fighting. That is about 600 truckloads a day, and aid agencies and the Israeli agency that oversees aid entering into the Gaza Strip have confirmed that hundreds of trucks are going in a day. There's an effort to ramp up that number and increase the number of trucks. But as you know, starvation was declared in the Gaza Strip not so long ago in parts of it, especially Gaza City. So there is a dire need for this aid. But actually, even before the ceasefire came into place, we were hearing that the aid going into the Gaza Strip was increasing. Whether or not that's going to prevent more deaths from malnutrition, well, that's going to be up to the doctors and those people who are providing aid to get it there in time. I can tell you that some of the more dangerous operations to bring aid into the Gaza Strip was a product of the desperation of the public there. They were mobbing these trucks. Now that presumably they're less desperate, getting the aid in might be a lot easier.
Right, Matt Bradley, Matt reporting from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much. For more on this, let's bring in Elise Labott. She is the author of the newsletter Cosmopolitics on Substack. Elise, good to have you with us. So earlier this hour, our reporter on the ground in Tel Aviv told us President Trump's popularity in Israel has skyrocketed, understandably, since this deal was announced. Today, we've seen people wearing Make America Great Again hats. Put this into historical context. In the Middle East, how does President Trump's popularity, his respect in the region compare with other U.S. leaders from the past?
I don't think you can underestimate how important he is for this country, not only this moment, but in the larger sense of history. And I think it's for several reasons. First of all, I think President Trump, look, all presidents have tried, most of them had not succeeded in being able to close deals. Obviously, Bill Clinton was very popular in the region. I would say Barack Obama, not so much. President Bush at the time was a little more popular. Joe Biden was, if you remember, very popular, and he even called himself a Zionist. And then, once he started to push Israel a little bit more, then the Israeli public turned against him. I think President Trump needed to not only recognize what Israel was going through, but what they needed to kind of get to yes. And he was able to use that relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He supported him not just during his first term with Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, moving the embassy over to Jerusalem. He also supported the campaign with Iran. And I think he saw that Israel needed to have a not just with the October 7th attack, guys, but also not having those hostages home. You see what's going on in Hostage Square. This country has been traumatized not having those hostages home. So being able to bring them home for the country, I just don't think you can underestimate the gratitude and the warmth that they feel for the president right now.
Elise, we've got just about a minute here, but let's talk about the historic nature of what's about to unfold. The president on his way to Egypt with a group of other world leaders. Walk us through quickly this peace summit.
Well, this is the peace summit that's going to talk about the next phase. We have the first phase, the handing over of those hostages, the pullback of Israeli troops, and the release of Palestinian hostages. Now, the hard part really begins. Who's going to run Gaza? How is Hamas going to disarm? The international stability force, the massive reconstruction that needs to take place. The whole international community really has to stay engaged. And, I think President Trump needs to stay engaged, but he's also been able to really leverage and rally all these relationships. I think he's going to get a very warm reception. And I think the hope is that he will stay engaged through this next phase, because that's really going to be what's important to keep everybody on the same page and keep everybody focused towards the real goal, which is ending the complete war. And to a lot of them, maybe not Israel, but to a lot of them, hopefully the creation of a Palestinian state, Palestinian governance, and a better future for the Palestinians.
Elise Labott, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay with us. More NBC News now after a quick break.
Developing right now on Morning News Now, history in the Middle East as phase one of a peace plan to end the war in Gaza is underway. President Trump on his way to Egypt for a peace summit that is being called the beginning of the end of that war in Gaza. Several other heads of state will also be in attendance.
But a notable absence, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who turned down an invitation by President Trump. This morning, all 20 living Israeli hostages released by Hamas are either back home or on the way.
As you're seeing on your of the hostages already reunited with their families after 2 years in captivity. In exchange, the first wave of Palestinian prisoners have been released by Israel.
Earlier this morning, a standing ovation for President Trump at Israel's Knesset, where he celebrated this day of peace.
But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over. And as the dust settles, the smoke fades, the debris is removed, and the ashes cleaned from the air, the day that breaks on a region transformed, and a beautiful and much brighter future appears suddenly within your reach.
And right now in Tel Aviv's hostage square, anxious anticipation for all the hostages to come home.
Good morning, and thank you very much for being with us on a historic day. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. A lot of breaking news to get to this morning. Let's get right to Tel Aviv's hostage square. Our Matt Bradley is there. Matt, first bring us up to speed on how this hostage release has unfolded overnight. These 20 living hostages returning to Israel and some of the reactions that you're hearing there in Hostage Square.
I mean, there's only been one reaction, which is just overjoyed. I mean, everybody here is just overflowing with goodwill for President Trump in particular. Every time, and you've been with me when this has been happening, there have been helicopters flying around doing basically flyovers. There's no reason for them to fly over here except for the crowd to see them and cheer. Some of these helicopters, we're told, contain some of the hostages that have been returning. So this has just been one incredible moment after another. I got to say, I feel privileged to actually be witnessing this. But over the last couple of days, it has been a frenzied effort to try to get these 20 out, with all sorts of changes and revisions going right up until the last minute, particularly with regards to the identities of those Palestinian prisoners who are serving life sentences, who are also have been released from Israeli prisons. But I can tell you that one of the things that has just been happening in the past couple of hours is that Hamas and others have said they're only going to be giving over 4 of the 28 dead hostages, human remains, corpses, out of those 28. And this has been a big issue here, and one that is sort of growing. All of the negotiators knew very well that Hamas was going to struggle to find these corpses. In fact, one of the people that I was speaking to on the Palestinian side of these negotiations said that a lot of the bodies have been buried by Hamas operatives who have since been killed in the war. So there was an effort to try to come with a group of international experts who would help Hamas and other Palestinians exhume these bodies. But now, the fact that only 4 have been released is becoming an increasingly large political issue. First, we heard from the Families Forum, the family members of those hostages. They condemned this and said it was a violation of this treaty. Now we're hearing from Israel Katz, Israel's defense minister, saying that any delay or deliberate avoidance will be considered a gross violation of the agreement and will be responded to accordingly. Now, like I said, a lot of these people knew that Hamas was going to struggle to find these hostages. There should be some level of understanding because that was made very clear. However, I believe that in the next couple of days or weeks, if we don't see all of those 28 coming in, we could see Israel and Hamas going back to something like a conflict. Whether or not that would be all-out war, nobody can really tell.
Certainly something we know that you'll keep your eyes on for us, Matt. I also want to ask you just some of the politics at play here. You've been outlining for us this morning President Trump's address to the Israeli parliament played there for people who are gathered in Hostage Square, while Prime Minister Netanyahu's was not. People wearing Make America Great Again hats. Just tell us about the popularity that President Trump is enjoying in Israel and how different that is than the feelings that many Israeli people have towards their own prime minister.
Well, it's like I was telling you before, and it's a very interesting question. You know, this square has typically represented a certain part of the Israeli polity. Typically those who are left-leaning, center-left, opposed to Benjamin Netanyahu. When Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner addressed the crowd here, they were booing when they heard Benjamin Netanyahu's name. And the speech that was delivered by Benjamin Netanyahu in front of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, was not broadcast on this big screen behind me. They only started broadcasting when the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, was speaking live. And then, of course, when President Trump addressed the body. There is a lot of anger here still for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A lot of people saying that while they're so cheered to see these hostages return, they are very disappointed that it took 2 years and that so many people died in the process. And you guys got to remember, too, important that's been buried from 2 years of war. So many Israelis are unsatisfied with the answers that they have received from the government regarding what happened on October 7th, 2 years ago. They are very upset that they haven't gotten a full accounting and they haven't seen the kinds of punishments up and down the upper echelons of Israeli government that they were hoping to see.
Matt, we should also note you're keeping an eye on things at Hostage Square there, but at the same time this morning we're following the release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees returning back to Gaza and the occupied West Bank. What's the update there?
That's right. Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and Egypt, and presumably other countries, third countries, that had agreed to take them. This is going to be a very sensitive issue for Israelis. It is a matter of great cheer for so many Palestinians. It's not just those 250 life sentence prisoners. Those are by far the most controversial, and many of them really do have blood on their hands from multiple actions that they committed and for which they were convicted. But there's also 1,700 people, or a little more than 1,700 people, who have been detained by Israelis ever since the start of the October 7th attacks. They were detained in Gaza, many of them held without charge, many of them children and women. The children and women were all released as part of this deal, and there were many, many more who are also going to be released. This is something that, again, a lot of Palestinians will see as a big victory for them. Hamas has already been touting this. Here in Israel, it's already being seen as very controversial. A lot of folks here are going to be very heartsick to see those who killed their loved ones and were convicted of doing so released. And no, we've seen this, of course, back many, many times, including that Gilad Shalit deal back more than 10 years ago that actually freed Yehia Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th attacks. That is going to be front and center in Israeli minds. Once the celebrations die down, there's going to be a big reckoning here, not just with the politics that I mentioned a moment ago, but also with how these prisoners have been allowed to let go and how their families are going to be dealing with it.
Matt Bradley, thank you very much for your continued reporting from Hostage Square. We will continue to check in with you throughout the morning. We now want to bring in the former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides. He's here with us on set. Ambassador, good morning. It's very good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Obviously, there is a lot to react to, and we want to get your reaction to what we've seen so far this morning, as well as talk about what's to come, what a rebuilding process looks like. Let's just start on this moment that we just kind of sat in there with our reporter, Matt Bradley, in Hostage Square. The release, all 20 remaining hostages in Gaza released home to Israel, and the celebrations that have since happened. Tell us your reaction to this.
Oh, well, how beautiful is that? You know, I've had the honor to speak many times at Hostage Square. I know many of the families that have been waiting for their loved ones to return. It's a beautiful day, and I give President Trump and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and the team that put this together an enormous amount of credit. This is a really beautiful day for those families, and most importantly as well as getting those families back is to stop the war in Gaza and to begin the humanitarian surge that needs to happen. A lot of innocent people that have died in Gaza over this last 2 years, and they need to be fed and taken care of. So the combination of getting the hostages back, hopefully getting the bodies of those who have fallen back, ending the war and surging Gaza with humanitarian, that makes a good day.
Many world leaders have sought peace in the Middle East over the decades, and certainly this peace is very fragile. But what do you think it is about President Trump and his team that has been able to get all sides to the table and come to this agreement in this moment? What's different about this than attempts we've seen in the past?
Well, you know, I was the ambassador to President Biden in Israel. We spent an enormous amount of time working on this issue, and as you know, success has a lot of parents. Okay, a long history here is, as you probably know, the original attack on Israel by Iran was under Joe Biden's watch, in which he then sent the ships in the Mediterranean to basically protect the state of Israel. That helped enormously. I like to remind people of the Iron Dome, which is the big defense system, was created and basically supported by Barack Obama. So, yes, I'm give Donald Trump, and listen, I'm a Democrat. I am more than happy to give Donald Trump credit and his team for getting this done. And Donald Trump will know. This is, maybe won't. But the reality is many, many people have a lot to do with peace. And it does not take away from the success here. But again, his style is something that not everyone likes. But it certainly worked in this particular case, so I congratulate him. But most importantly, I want to celebrate what we have here. It's the beginning of a very long process, and none of us should be under any illusions here how complicated this is.
Absolutely. What did you make of the president's remarks before Israeli parliament, speaking for just over an hour?
The president has an unusual speaking ability. As you know, he doesn't always stick to the teleprompter, and I think you showed that there. But the reality of this is he is in a jovial mood, a happy mood, as he should be. He deserves credit for getting this done. And so from my perspective, he has his moment in the sun, and I certainly respect it. I'm very close to President Herzog, and I saw him there and the Speaker of the Knesset. So nothing that can be said will take away from my personal joy of seeing these families reunited. That's what matters here today.
You're seeing a live shot, Air Force One getting set to land there in Egypt for the next phase of today's events. You mentioned this. Now comes perhaps the hardest part. What do you think needs to be the priority moving forward to keep the ceasefire in place and actually try to make some progress toward disarming Hamas and trying to rebuild Gaza or start that process?
That's a really good question. I've been through this many times. I was the Deputy Secretary of State under Secretary Clinton. This stuff gets complicated, as you know, and it gets messy. And it's after the fanfare and the most important thing of getting these hostages back, now the real work begins. And I think, number one, there's no question, mass humanitarian aid needs to be brought to Gaza. Number two, massive amount of money needs to be brought into Gaza to rebuild. There's nowhere for them to live. These Gazans, again, this is a fact. They're coming back to the north. They have nowhere homes. Money needs to get there. And then third, obviously, you already hear the issue around the bodies. But what is going to come next in Gaza? Who's going to govern Gaza? Under the 20-point plan, there's a multinational force, maybe a group that Donald Trump will be chair of, and Tony Blair will be the CEO of. I don't know. What I do know is diplomacy is complicated, and it's going to take a lot of time. And my hope is that this administration won't get bored by this and go on to the next thing. They'll focus on the details. That's what's going to happen.
Ambassador Tom Nice, thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate your perspective.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, now we're going to be joined by NBC Nightly News anchor, senior national correspondent as well, Tom Yamas. He is on the ground in Tel Aviv. Tom, you've been covering the developments there from Hostage Square as the Israeli hostages came home, as well as listening in on President Trump's remarks earlier to the Israeli parliament. Tell us what you've seen and heard there on the ground this morning.
Yeah, we've really seen it all, Savannah. We've seen celebrations here. We've seen singing. We've seen tears. President Trump, when he was appearing on the big screen earlier, when he was speaking at the Knesset, he would get loud cheers. I mean, it was a standing ovation, if you will. And it's interesting because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when he spoke, they did not broadcast that here in Hostage Square. So sort of a difference in politics here of the way people perceive President Trump and some perceive Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Right now, we've been covering these new developments about a point of contention, it appears. We talked about the 20 living hostages that have been released earlier today. It has been incredible news here. There have been helicopters earlier that were flying over, and it was believed to be some of the hostages were in there as they were flying over Tel Aviv, and the crowd here would erupt in cheers. It's a little later now. It's 5 o'clock, early evening, so the crowd is not as full or energetic as it was before earlier in the day. But I'm saying this because it's been a day full of joy. But there's just been news received that only the remains of 4 hostages that did not survive that are going to be sent over or given up by Hamas. That's a very big point of contention because there were 28 families hoping to get their loved ones' remains. It's unclear when exactly that'll happen. But this speaks to a larger point, which is in this peace plan, right? This first phase, it looks like it has worked out. The 20 living hostages have come over. They seem to be okay. They're going to be taken care of here. 2,000 prisoners and detainees, Palestinians, have been released by Israel back into the West Bank and back into Gaza. So that end of the bargain has been done. Now some of the tougher questions. Who's going to run Gaza? What will happen to Hamas? Will that tunnel network be destroyed? The Minister of Defense here saying that Hamas's underground tunnel network in Gaza needs to be destroyed. About a third of it already has been in the war. But what happens to the rest of it? Who will run Gaza? And will Hamas ultimately surrender? These are all questions that need to be hammered out. Some of those we may learn happen in Egypt. We have all those Arab and Muslim countries there, along with President Trump and other nations as well. But listen, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not there. We know that Mahmoud Abbas will be there from the Palestinian Authority. But it's still, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think we'll know in the coming days and weeks if all of the peace plan holds. For now, this is a joyous day in Israel. People are incredibly happy here. They hope this is the beginning to the end of the war. That was the tone of President Trump's speech at the Knesset, that it's a new day in the Middle East. But we're going to have to wait and see if that's a reality.
Tom, you have been covering this for a long time. You've been on the ground there in the Middle East numerous times. Just your observations, your reflections on this moment, especially with everything that the world has gone through over the past 2 years.
Yeah, you know, I've spoken to families that have lost loved ones in this terror attack. I've spoken to family members who their loved ones survived, but then later died in captivity. And then we're speaking to people today that are getting their loved ones back. You know, it's a range of emotions here. It is incredible how the country is. There have been, you know, nights here at Hostage Square where they've had 400,000, 500,000 people. To put that in perspective, that would be like an assembly in the United States of millions, tens of millions, of the size of Israel. So this has united the country. They've all come together, gotten those hostages for more than 2 years. It has been on the minds of every Israeli. You see the posters everywhere you go. So today was a monumental day. It was indeed a historic day. And we hope that momentum and sort of that lasting peace can hold for longer, because it's what the region needs right now. 67,000 Palestinians are estimated to have been killed in the war there in Gaza. Gaza's decimated. Tens of thousands trying to return home to their parts of Gaza City, to nothing, to rubble. Aid is slowly trickling in, but we know there's been starvation there as well. So it has been a horrific scene for the last 2 years in this region. And they're hoping the momentum, at least President Trump is, hoping the momentum that we saw today can carry on further, Joe.
Tom, while the country may be united, and certainly, of course, when it comes to the joy of the hostages returning, Israel, even just apart from how lasting peace can be, has their own internal politics really to sort of reckon with here. We saw that really play out in the Israeli parliament this morning, even with President Trump sort of urging for Prime Minister Netanyahu to be pardoned and mentioning Netanyahu, you should be nicer to the opposition leader who also spoke. Walk us through what this looks like for Israel as they try to reckon internally with where they're at.
Look, just like politics are complicated in the United States, the politics here are complicated as well, the local politics. And yes, President Trump comes here and he is, like we've seen and witnessed, adored by the Israelis that we've seen here, especially in Tel Aviv. There are billboards supporting him. You saw the reaction he got in the Knesset there. For Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it's a different story. He has been investigated here over corruption. Some in Israel feel like he's extended this war too long. Others have questioned some of the choices he's made as a leader of the military forces here. But others support him. Others do support Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well. Conservatives support him. So it's a complicated picture, and this war has dragged on for more than 2 years, and families have been affected. 1,200 killed in that terror attack. There are still a lot of questions on how could this happen. Israel, with the amount of intelligence that it has around the world, how did it not know what was happening in certain parts of its country? How was Hamas able to launch this attack for hours on Israeli citizens, where 1,200 lost their lives? So there's still a lot of questions here. It's incredibly complicated. It's not going to be solved overnight or in one day with the release of these hostages, and it's something that Israel will reckon with in the coming weeks and months.
Tom Yamas reporting on the ground in Israel. You're looking live right now. Air Force One touching down in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, just moments ago. We want to get to our Keir Simmons, who is there as President Trump prepares for this Gaza Peace Summit. Keir, set the scene for us.
Well, Air Force One just flew over us just a minute or so ago as it made that landing at Sharm el-Sheikh airport. It was the second time it flew over. First time flew over flanked by fighter jets, and so a very theatrical, if you like, display from President Trump, the Trump administration, as they arrive here for a summit that will be all about show, but also all about the detail. What's been it's astonishing to be here for the past few hours waiting is that alongside us, some of the most powerful leaders in the world have been waiting here in Sharm el-Sheikh for President Trump to arrive. The Chancellor of Germany strolled over, stood next to us while President Trump was speaking at the Knesset and said politely, can I watch President Trump's speech alongside you and watched NBC's monitor to see what the US leader was saying. So this has been put together by the pure personal power of the presidency, very much that kind of face-to-face diplomacy that you've seen from President Trump during his second administration and even his first. But also what we're seeing here, and you've been talking about it, are some of the hurdles, and you see it transparently with the Trump administration, some of the hurdles that this process involves. So the news that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel was going to come, that President Trump, according to the President of Egypt, had got on the phone with the Egyptian leader and Prime Minister Netanyahu and arranged that would happen, and then the news that from Prime Minister Netanyahu's office that he wouldn't come, citing the fact that it was a holiday in Israel. And that's just one example of many of the difficulties that we will see as these leaders get together and try to figure out how to turn this hostage release and this release of Palestinian prisoners into a peace process for Gaza and the Middle East.
Keir, I know you've been speaking with some of the leaders who are gathered there that Trump will be with as they sort of symbolically come together for this and also try to really make real progress at this summit. What are they telling you?
Yeah, so just some of the leaders, as an example, the President of France, President Emmanuel Macron, the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, and too, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands was one of those who came out here just to talk to journalists and talk to his own reporters. And I really wanted to ask him, we just got a chance to ask him a question in English, and I really wanted to ask him that crucial question of, you know, what are you going to do? What are the plans to turn these hopes into reality in Gaza? Take a listen.
We'll have a lot of negotiations, but the ink just dried out of this peace plan. Actually, the signing has to be in just a few moments. So I think there will be a lot of talks the current days about the how to implement this peace plan to make sure that phase 1 is not the phase where it sticks to. We go to phase 2 and 3, and in the end to a two-state solution as far as the Dutch government is concerned.
Alongside the Palestinian president.
What we have right now is that 20-point peace plan from the Trump administration. There needs to be much more detail, of course, but just when you read that, it does highlight some of the hurdles ahead. As an example, it talks about an apolitical, non-political Palestinian leadership for Gaza. Well, where are you going to find Palestinians who aren't political? It talks about disarming Hamas walking away from the political process. How is that going to be achieved, and how are the collective international forces and Israel, all of the Arab leaders gathered here and such like, how are they going to make that a reality, and how to even temporarily administer Gaza while it is rebuilt, which is going to take some time. I mean, these are very, very challenging questions, and I think you won't get all of the answers here today, but it will be the beginning. I will say there is a lot of positivity here today.
Keir Simmons standing by in Egypt for us, where Air Force One, as you can see, has touched down, is now taxiing the runway. We expect to see the president emerge from there shortly. We want to go to NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who is at the White House, has been keeping an eye on everything for us. Monica, moments ago, President Trump touching down in Egypt for this summit after speaking at the Knesset in Israel. He's behind schedule. What do we know is the schedule, the plan moving forward, where it's now 5:30 p.m. in Egypt?
Yeah, a couple hours behind schedule, Savannah and Joe, but that is because the president wanted to take as much time as he could earlier in the day when he was in Israel, meeting with hostage families, meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addressing the Knesset, giving that lengthy address that was over 1 hour with those remarks that touched on so much of what we've seen unfold today in real time, but also with an indication as to what we might now hear next as the president arrives in Egypt, where he will be huddled with many other heads of state to try to discuss the future. While they are definitely celebrating phase one of this peace plan that the president had worked on, now comes the difficult part of implementation of everything next in line in terms of phase two and beyond. And there are really large looming questions about the governance of Gaza, how Hamas will ultimately disarm, what will happen to the group, how Gaza will be rebuilt. All of those things really still need to be dealt with. But the president is going to come here, and he's in a Red Sea resort town, as you've just been talking to Keir about, to stand and sign officially and have a ceremony over these documents about at least what this initial phase means. And what's notable is that he is going to be joined by the Palestinian Authority President, Mahmoud Abbas, as well as leaders from France, Germany, the UK, Canada, in addition to many others and Arab leaders who were really key in getting this agreement to the point that we're at now. It was a really pivotal meeting, I'm told, on the sidelines of the United Nations just last month, where the president met with Arab leaders and essentially pitched them on this peace plan. He got a lot of feedback. Some tweaks were made, we understand, a couple of changes, but getting their support was fundamental to then being able to take that plan to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was then at the White House a couple of days after that meeting. And once he backed it, they were able to proceed. And then the negotiations over the last 10 days or so obviously led to this historic moment of seeing the freed hostages now being released and reunited with their loved ones. But there are ongoing questions, for instance, about the return of the remains of the 28 hostages who are no longer living, that were in Hamas captivity, that, of course, the families are still demanding their bodies be returned. And we know that that process has started, but there are many that are still waiting for information about when they might be reunited with their loved ones' remains so that they may have a proper burial. So a lot of questions still to come, but I think what you're about to see here in Egypt is a moment of celebration about just getting to this part, even though it's sort of the beginning of the end of the war in Gaza. The president declaring the end of the war in his speech earlier today in Israel, but as we know, there's still a really complex path ahead.
Monica, we're seeing this flurry of activity right there on the runway as the president has landed, has touched down in Air Force One. We are anticipating him deplaning any moment now. Monica, if you wouldn't mind also just let's take a quick step back, do a little rewind, because we heard quite a bit from the president this morning as he addressed the Israeli parliament about the team that really brought this deal together. As we're watching the staircase move towards the plane right now, we heard him speak quite a bit about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's involvement, Steve Witkoff, U.S. envoy. Walk us through how this plan that, by the way, a lot of world leaders have tried to do similar things, but this one actually coming together with this particular team, what we know.
Yeah, world leaders, certainly the Biden administration endeavored to try to build some progress toward this place while the former president, Joe Biden, was in office. And today, you really had the president heralding some of his closest advisors here in the special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and in Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has for months been working behind the scenes to try to get these relationships to a place where something like this could unfold. It was really interesting when he talked about Steve Witkoff, who's a businessman who doesn't have this kind of foreign policy background, certainly, but who the president said he confided in because he thought he was such a good deal maker and negotiator that he decided to put him in this position. And of course, it's not just this conflict that Steve Witkoff has been working on. He's also been working on trying to see if there's any potential peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. But Steve Witkoff has been a part of these conversations. He's been inside Gaza. He has tried to advance the humanitarian efforts into the besieged enclave. And certainly the other person that you just mentioned is Jared Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, who was a more day-to-day presence, certainly with his wife Ivanka Trump in the first Trump administration. They were here. They were working as advisors. This time around, they are not taking on that role. They're not here. They don't live in Washington, D.C. like they did last time. But we know that, of course, they are people who are extremely influential to the president. And when he is making important decisions, their voices are key. But Jared Kushner in particular had been, of course, very involved in the Abraham Accords in the first term. And this time around, when there were very serious talks about a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the president said he called on his son-in-law, on his, quote, beautiful brain, saying he wanted to get him into these rooms, into these conversations. So it was really Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the last 10 days or so that played an absolutely essential role in drawing on their past relationships, on some of their institutional knowledge, and on really meeting with all of the different parties and having those kinds of fine point conversations that you have at the end of a deal. The way Jared Kushner described it is you just have to get them to yes, and then you can figure everything out after that. And that is sort of the approach that they took. They wanted to be sure that they could get an acceptance that the hostages would be released. And now, of course, comes this really difficult part, but one that is easier, at least, to tackle once you have the hostages freed and now the rest can be dealt with, even though certainly there are likely to be disagreements and it can take months. But as you are seeing there on your screen, it's important to point out the role that Egypt has played in all of this and its president. Of course, Egypt is one of the locations, in addition to Qatar, that really hosted a lot of these fragile talks in the lead up to this historic day. And so that is also why you certainly are having the leadership of Egypt, their president al-Sisi, and others play this pivotal role now in hosting a summit on the future of Gaza, since this was a place where so many of those discussions would often take place, in addition, again, to a couple of other places in the Middle East and in Europe as well.
Absolutely. And those members of President Trump's team, by the way, are getting a standing ovation, as he called them out this morning in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. I also want to bring back Keir Simmons, who is in Egypt. Monica, stay with us as well. We are watching right now Air Force One, anticipating President Trump walking out of that door, deplaning, heading down those stairs and to this peace summit any moment now. Keir, it is notable because of the group that is waiting on the president that he is quite delayed. That often happens with the president, but quite a few speeches and things going longer. Lots of conversation post that speech, as we saw on the runway at the Tel Aviv airport prior to the president taking off. Walk us through, Keir, sort of the web of leadership here. Who's there, these other heads of state, why they are notable, and how they could factor in here as we watch and wait for the president to deplane for this?
Well, let's begin with the Arab world and leaders of the Gulf states. So there is the Saudi foreign minister here, for example. There is the leader, the emir of Qatar. There is one of the representatives of the United Arab Emirates. These are countries that we have watched the Trump administration lean into the relationship with, if you like. And one of the reasons for that is because they are increasingly powerful, increasingly wealthy, and that, I think, has an impact and has implications, because one of the pivot points that we have seen over the past weeks is that Israeli attack on that Hamas office in Doha, the capital of Qatar. That really outraged many of the leaders who are here now. And I think that was potentially a turning point where the Trump administration decided enough is enough. And I think it was interesting to hear President Trump's speech at the Knesset. He speaks in a fulsome way and with some humor at times, but he also delivered some tough messages for Israel, didn't he? Including, as an example, he said, you are effectively, in so many words, he said, you're a small country in a very big world and you can't go against the world. And I think one of the principal, some of the principal countries in that image that President Trump has of the world are the powerful Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, like United Arab Emirates, like Qatar. And then others that are here are the leaders of the biggest countries in Europe. So the German Chancellor, as I mentioned earlier, the British Prime Minister, the French President, President Macron, all of them have had less influence, frankly, in this process. And you think about the history of the Middle East, that itself is pretty stunning, that European leaders have been less influential than they would have been in the past. But they very much will want to be part of the conversations that are happening here. They have played a role. And, of course, one of the things that will be front of mind for those leaders will be that there is another war, the Russia-Ukraine war, where they very much need the Trump administration's help. So what we've seen is the British Prime Minister, for example, posting that the UK is going to send more money for the reconstruction of Gaza. You've seen the French President posting that France will be with President Trump all the way in this peace process, that they will have wanted to be here, and I very much would have made sure that they were here, and this is just that. Don't underestimate how much of a challenge for these countries that will have been, because this has been thrown together. I mean, we've been here since the early hours, and there were flags kind of in a corner waiting to be laid out. I mean, the Egyptians have done a pretty amazing job of putting this together in a very, very short time. All of those leaders, all of the leaders that are here will have something else that they will know very clearly, which is that, frankly, it is the power of the American presidency and President Trump's very particular kind of face-to-face diplomacy that has made this happen. Some will say too late, some will say it could have happened earlier if he'd put pressure on Israel, but it has made this happen, and the leaders here now will know that they need President Trump's attention looking forward if the big hurdles ahead are to be tackled.
President Trump now off of Air Force One, walking there, as you can see, headed your way very shortly. Keir, you touched on this, but this Mideast Peace Summit, it's not just, leaders getting together because they all like this plan in theory. There's real work to be done, specifically really two areas, right? One is the rebuilding of Gaza. That is going to take money that is going to be needed from many of these world leaders, and also the governing of Gaza and this board of peace that President Trump says that he's putting together, he will oversee as it sort of gets its feet under itself again. Walk us through what we know in terms of commitments from anyone in this room on either of those fronts.
Well, countries are committing in principle to send money. They will also, though, want to know how the money is spent. By the way, I don't think we're going to get into this detail necessarily at this meeting here where I am, just a few paces away from where I am now. I think there'll be something of a tone of celebration and a kind of sense of let's get started. But when they get to the details, the countries will want to know where the money is spent. And just the difficulty of that, just think about this, that there, as you'll know, there was huge controversy over money that was sent through Qatar to Gaza that critics said ended up in the pockets of Hamas. So how do you send money to Gaza? How do you fund the reconstruction, but make sure that you don't fund militant groups? That's one point. Another question about this group gathered here is, are any of them prepared to put their own people in the way? Boots on the ground, as we would say. Certainly the US is not going to do that. Are any of the neighboring countries ready to police Gaza in frankly, it's going to be years, through the years of reconstruction? Is there a risk that those policing Gaza will be blamed by the Palestinian people living there if it doesn't go as well as people on the ground might have hoped? And then another question is this. There's a lot of talk here about removing Hamas from the political process, disarming Hamas. There are other militant groups too. The peace plan, the 20-point peace plan that the Trump administration has put forward, talks about apolitical Palestinian leadership, a non-political Palestinian leadership. Just ask yourself, are there any Palestinians living in Gaza who aren't political at this stage? How do you find those people? These are very thorny issues, challenges ahead, and you're going to, again, just the same point, it's really going to need the momentum built today and the force of the Trump administration's leverage if there's any chance that those hurdles are going to be overcome.
Absolutely. Keir, we are seeing President Trump now drive away from the airport again, headed in your direction there, this resort city in Egypt where this is taking place. Keir, just from a tactical perspective, you mentioned like what we anticipate seeing today is sort of this air of celebration. And I think the way you put it was that let's get started type of attitude. But just kind of walk us through what we do anticipate seeing. What is going to happen right now and unfold over the next little bit?
Well, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see heaps of praise for President Trump. You're going to see the signing of a peace document. We're not sure what exactly it's going to say, but I think you're going to see the leaders of Egypt and Qatar and Turkey and the US president sign that document. I spoke to some European governments earlier this morning. At that point, they weren't clear whether they were going to have a chance to speak. They may. I certainly think that we'll hear a long speech from President Trump, fulsome words from President Trump. That's his style, of course. And so how long this will take is another interesting point. The schedule is completely off at this stage, but at what point will Air Force One wheels up and head back to Washington? I can't tell you the answer to that right now. But then behind closed doors, there will be those conversations about, what are our real positions for the different countries. Just as an example, Saudi Arabia, which is one of the most powerful countries in this region, it's certainly the most powerful Arab countries in this region, it has been vociferous in its criticism of the Netanyahu government. Would Saudi Arabia be prepared to, frankly, agree to anything while Bibi Netanyahu was still Prime Minister? Maybe they'll shift their position, but certainly the indications have been that they wouldn't be. So, again, those conversations we may not see in public. Although this is a Trump administration where it's transparent diplomacy, so we might hear about some of that stuff.
Absolutely. Keir Simmons, the president, headed your way to this room you see on your screen right now. We will be back after a very quick break with more continuing coverage of this breaking news here on Morning News Now. We are back on a historic morning in the Middle East. President Trump addressing the Israeli parliament just a few hours ago, and now just moments ago landing in Egypt for this Middle East peace summit, joined by several other world leaders. Also overnight, the 20 remaining living hostages being held in Gaza released and now reuniting with their families back home in Israel. Our Matt Bradley has been reporting on this throughout the morning for us. He is in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. Matt, good morning. I think something that is just so notable there, very clear in Hostage Square, as we've seen behind you and as you've been reporting on, is this support that the Israeli people are showing to President Trump, wearing Make America Great Again hats, posters with President Trump's face on them. You have members of the Israeli parliament wearing hats that say Trump, the peace president, all as the president is about to have this summit get underway, quite delayed, by the way, because of his schedule and his timing, with 20 other heads of state essentially just standing around waiting for literally hours for him. Walk us through what this support looks like for the president there in Hostage Square and beyond in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, Savannah, just a couple of days ago, it was even more obvious. There were as many American flags in the crowd as there were Israeli flags. Today, it's actually mostly all Israeli flags here. But there is an enormous amount of support for the president here. He's more popular than even Israel's own prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. As I've been saying, when Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Knesset, he was not carried on that big screen back there. In fact, the live coverage of the Knesset only started when Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, addressed that body. And then, of course, they carried President Trump's lengthy speech in full. There was so much cheering, not just for the president, but also for the proceedings of the day, what's been going on. This screen behind me has been showing some of those freed hostages finally meeting their family members. That gets a huge cheer. We've been seeing helicopters flying overhead, making what looks like a close flyby. They've been flying real slow, very low, and just allowing the crowd to cheer. Presumably, many or all of those helicopters flying over the square contain some of those released hostages on their way to medical observation and treatment or on their way home. So this has been a really, really interesting day here, and one that's just been filled with joy for now. There's also been some other issues, and there's a lot of negotiations that are going to have to go into the second phase of this deal, the terms of which are essentially undecided. After all of this is done, and it's still going on, we're going to be hearing of a lot of disagreements that are going on in terms of how Gaza, is going to be governed, whether or not or how Hamas is going to be disarmed, reconstruction, as you mentioned a moment ago. All of these are open and outstanding issues that still need to be discussed by all of the parties who are involved in creating that 20-point plan. This is just phase one, and it's not over yet, because we heard from Hamas that they were only able to provide the bodies of 4 of the hostages who had been slain either on October 7th or since then as they were hostages. There are 28 of those bodies left. That might not be a deal breaker, because all of the parties who are, again, involved in creating this 20-point plan, they were well aware that Hamas was going to struggle to find some of these bodies for the simple reason that some of the people who buried these bodies have been killed in combat since those bodies were buried, so they don't know where they are. Some of the bodies even date back 10 years. They were killed in previous conflicts. So this is something that is really going to be causing problems in the days ahead. But there is a lot of understanding, or there had been. We did hear from the Israel Katz, from the Minister of Defense of Israel, saying that this was a clear violation of the ceasefire. Whether or not this turns into a big issue, only the next couple of days are going to tell. But if Israelis don't get the rest of those 24 bodies back, then this could really put the entire operation at risk.
Matt, can you tell us a little bit more about the mechanics here that you mentioned, by the way, while we look at live pictures from Egypt, where the president is set to arrive any moment now, where this peace summit will get underway. Matt, tell us more about the mechanics of these hostages being released and reunited with their families, what people have seen there in Hostage Square, what we know about the health and well-being of some of these hostages, and what we know about them seeing their families again for the first time.
I mean, these have been emotional reunions that have been captured mostly by the IDF and by others and broadcast widely. So, I mean, we've been seeing all of these reunions. There's been people in the crowd here crying looking at this screen behind me, as we've been seeing, as I mentioned, you know, the proceedings in the Knesset were on a split screen with some of these hostage reunions. So that has been a huge deal for folks here to see that. Now, a lot of those hostages came out walking on their own 2 feet. I had expected that some of them might be wheeled out on stretchers or in wheelchairs. That wasn't the case. They all look relatively okay. They're going to be going to hospitals for triage and for evaluation and, of course, further medical treatment. Some of them are going to be suffering for quite a while. And a lot of these wounds are not going to be visible. For these hostages, really, their journey back to recovery, it begins today, and it's probably going to be long and difficult.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you very much for your continued reporting from Hostage Square. We will continue to check in with you throughout the morning. Now, though, we want to bring in Bradley Bowman. He is the Senior Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy Center on Military and Political Power. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk through what we think we are about to see. As our Keir Simmons, who's on the ground there in Egypt, mentioned, he believes that this will be the sort of air of celebration with an attitude of let's get to work. Talk, though, about what we may see in practice and also just symbolically what this agreement and this group of world leaders. There's President Trump walking in right now, it appears, to this summit in Egypt. He's made his way from the airport. How significant is what is about to unfold?
I think it's incredibly significant. This is clearly an extraordinary day. It's so good to see these 20 surviving hostages finally back home in Israel. There are important tasks and difficult days ahead, and it begins, frankly, here in moments. But this is an example, in my view, of what the United States can accomplish when Washington establishes clear goals. It leads on the international stage, stands with our closest allies, and combines diplomatic pressure and military strength. And I think it's that combination of American diplomatic leadership and, frankly, Israeli military pressure on the ground that got us to this point. This is a major accomplishment, I think, for the United States and for Israel and, frankly, for all people of good faith. There's an opportunity here to carve out a better future for both Israel and Palestinians. It's going to be very, very difficult. Hamas retains what I would call its sick ideology. It retains power and retains its weapons. So who is going to oversee the disarmament of Hamas? I mean, this isn't going to be like the British after Yorktown, filing out in single file orderly line, laying down their weapons. You know, this could be very difficult. And so the fact that you have so many leaders coming to Sharm el-Sheikh, from both Europe and the Middle East is very, very positive. There's an opportunity here if I think the Trump administration keeps its focus and continues to lead and build broad coalitions to try to serve American and regional interests based on principles that we share.
What you said just a moment ago, you posted on social media this morning that this is an extraordinary day, but there are difficult days ahead. What do you think is the biggest obstacle right now?
I think the biggest obstacle is Hamas and frankly, the opinion of many Palestinians. We all want a better future for Palestinians, but until we have a decisive majority of Palestinians rejecting Hamas's ideology and recognizing that Israel has existed, does exist, and will continue to exist, until that happens, I think we're going to struggle to have tangible and durable progress toward a better future for Palestinians. And I think it's important that Democrats in the United States recognize that this is a very positive thing and that Republicans and Democrats should be unified in trying to build this better future. And we should stop trying to apply pressure on Israel, because when we do that, that creates the perception among Hamas and Hamas supporters that there's a wedge that can be driven among Americans and thereby between Americans and Israelis. And it entices them into the idea that they can divide the United States and Israel and that there might be a future for this sick ideology. Only until that sick ideology is set aside by most Palestinians will we be able to finally have the future for both Israel and Palestinians that we all want.
I understand that what you're saying is that that is difficult, but I guess my question is, do you think that is possible? How does something like that work in practice? Who is the arbiter, of understanding if that is in fact the case on the ground or not?
Right. No, it's going to come down to individuals, but we've seen incredible suffering in Gaza, suffering that was not happening on October 6th. And I think we have to look at the role of Qatar here, and we have to work with Arab partners of goodwill and try to, one, disarm Hamas, as I said, deprive it of leadership, get international forces in there that can promote peace and security and begin to bring a better life for Palestinians so they can see that they can have the life they want if they choose peace over trying to exterminate the world's only majority Jewish state.
Brad Bowman, good to have you with us. Appreciate your analysis this morning. We do want to get back to Keir Simmons in Egypt as we prepare for President Trump and this incredible summit that's taking place, this historic moment. Keir, set the stage for us. What should we know right now?
Well, what you should know is that some of the most powerful leaders in the world are in that room, not just from the Middle East, but, for example, the three most powerful countries in Europe, each of their leaders are France, Germany, and the UK. Each of their leaders are there. There are the representatives from the most economically powerful, at least, countries here in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. There was even a suggestion that the Iranians might attend. They say they turned down that invitation. Not there, too, is Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. And the reason, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu's office, is because there's a holiday in Israel. But I think that we may find in the days to come that there was a lot of diplomatic wrangling around that.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.